Okay, stage 2. It's all about sculpting the body and head. And let's see what we have here for the questions that we have. These are the questions that we usually have when we want to sculpt the body for character for video game. I mean, there are lots more in actual production, because it depends on what type of game you are making and at which stage of the game you are in. Like, if you are, for example, if this is the first character that you are going to make for that project, most probably you would have like tons of questions, because you are just like establishing the building blocks for the whole game, and usually that may take like many months or like a year or sometimes 2 years to just, I don't know, sometimes, I mean, that can be that wild. So yeah, let's go to the ones that we have here for this character. So the first question is about how the default pose of this character should be. The thing is, for different project, because of the needs of that project, we have different default pose. Like, famously, we have like a few words for them, like T pose or A pose or things like that. T-pose is a little bit too much. I never liked making a character fully T-pose, to be like arms 90 degree up. It's so hard to make a character that end up looking cool when the arms are down. So I would say A pose is probably my favorite, because I mean, we have different A poses, but I don't usually rotate the arms of my character too much up. So I change it like 45 degree, something like that. So it won't change the look of the shoulders that much. And in some project, like in shooter project, we see that they bend the arm in like from the elbow a little bit forward. So it's all, the default pose is all about actually, it's not about even body. The whole character is mostly about like how we see these character most of the time. And let's make sure this character looks the best in that, like in the way we see it mostly. So yeah, for this one, I will go for A pose. I don't rotate elbows like forearms that much. It would be probably straight. And yeah, I will keep the leg a little bit like wider than, like, I don't keep them like fully straight. That's another thing that I don't like. But yeah, you will see how I establish the pose of the character when I'm sculpting it. The next question is which parts of the body is exposed in the final model. For this character, we have hands from wrist down, and we have a little bit of feet, and we have face, and that's all. Do we have a base mesh or 3D scan to use, or we will sculpt it from scratch? I will go in detail. I will talk in detail about this topic when I'm sculpting the body. But as a short answer, I would say we sculpted from scratch for this tutorial. How realistic the proportions should be for this character? I personally, in like my personal words, I like to make my character realistic, but with a little bit of like a stylization in primary shapes. Like, for example, for this character, I may end up making the legs a little bit longer, for like upper body a little bit shorter, like probably make the chest a little bit like wider than realistic proportions. But you will see during this workshop I make it probably at first like more realistic, and then when I add the costume on top of the body, I try to change it a little by little to be sure that at the end I have the proportions and the look that I want. What are the most extreme movements this character would have? Actually, this question is more like production question, and it depends on the type of game you make, type of like action that character should have. Like, for example, if you are making a platformer game and the character needs to climb up like rocks and like different stuff, maybe you need to simplify the shoulder pads or like the shoulder area, or figure out different smart ways to making sure those areas look cool. Or maybe if you maybe you need to just like do different blend shapes or things like that, kind of like things to consider from the beginning to be sure that your character looks nice and good in those poses. For example, in some I've been in a couple of platforming games that they wanted me to make the arms of the character a little bit longer, so the character can reach to different points that they needed to add in the like a platforming animations. Like they were giving that would give the animators a little bit like a little bit better option to make their climbing animations. For this character, I think we are pretty safe, because this character, he would be mostly like a spellcaster, and he plays this instrument which is kind of like played as like a cello, and we have enough room here on the shoulders so we can have those sorts of movements. I think he can easily rotate his hand up, not like a platforming character, but he can go much higher than 90 degree, and it should be all fine. And the next question is, do we need to do any proportion adjustment based of the movements? I would say for this character, no. But again, I told you about if we had like a platforming character, we could do some stuff or stuff like that. But for this character, no, we don't need that. Let's go in Zbrush. finally I start having fun in ZBrush and sculpting the body and face from scratch, kinda. It's not fully from scratch. I grab one of the mannequins, like a Z-sphere mannequins that you can find in the ZBrush Lightbox. I grab one of those, and use the Dynamesh to be able to change the shapes and forms however I want. And yeah, I start adding shapes, like this is upper leg, this is lower leg, this is like leg, this is like that, this is knee, this is arm. I add those, try to be anatomically correct, but for me, when it comes to sculpting body and face, shapes are much more important. This is not a anatomy class, because you basically can make a whole tutorial only talking about sculpting hand, for example, or face, or leg, or feet. So this is kind of like me talking to you about my approach when it comes to sculpting body and face. I would say for someone who is going to study anatomy and sculpting body and face, I would say it would be better for you to go there and study anatomy first, as much as you know the muscles and kind of like the relation. After you learn that, it would be good to try to see all of those as shapes. And again, after a bit of time, you can go back, study anatomy again, and again go again and look at the whatever you learn as shapes. Because at the end, knowing how to make a good shape is much more important than knowing the name of the muscles and being exactly like correct anatomically. Because at the end of the day, you may end up getting a project to sculpt something that is not anatomically correct. Like, the character has forearms. That's no way you can make it anatomically correct without bending the roots. Like adding 4 shoulder blades in the back is a really hard job. But if you know how to sculpt shapes, how to sculpt good shapes, and how to see shapes in whatever you see, that's the best approach when it comes to sculpt basically anything. Like whatever you want to sculpt, if you can see the shapes in it, in the reference that you look at, that way you can make everything look good. And yeah, here I just like try to be anatomically correct as much as it doesn't limit me to do whatever I want with the look of my character. Yeah, as you see, I change everything like whenever I want to make it the way that I want this character to look. And this is like the whole building block of the whole character. That's why it's so important. And I sculpted from scratch because I have it doesn't limit me basically to do whatever I want. Because basically, if you use like 3D scans or base body for your character, at the end of the day, in most cases, your character would be kind of similar to the other characters that are sculpted on top of that base body or base mesh or 3D scan. yeah, and for the face again, I add everything. I add eye, I add eye socket, I add nose, and I try to look at the concept. And for sure, I don't add these forms and shapes as like if I want to sculpt like an African face or like a Asian face or Mongolian face. I try to sculpt them the way that I want and I see in in the references that I picked for this character. But I add those first, and then I change the relation to each other. And the way I don't like to put the model on top of the reference and match them one by one. I really dislike that way. I don't like that process. I try to see the reference and look at, for example, what's the relation between like lengths of from eyebrow to top of the head and from eyebrow to tip of the nose, and which one is bigger, how much is bigger, and try to use that kind of measurements to know the shapes and like relationship of those shapes together. This way I can do whatever I want to get like a overall look of that concept, to make it feels like that character, not exactly 100% exactly the same. And yeah, this is the whole character. This is like a base body, kind of like a block mesh. This is the Dynameshed version. What I do after I finish blocking out the body is to make a copy of that subtool and go there and ZBrush it. I don't have any like specific knowledge about ZBrush. I just like crank up the target poly count number, because as far as I know, this is not exact, and run a ZBrusher and see the result to see if it's too high res, it's too low res, or is there anything that I need to change in my sculpt to be able to achieve a better topology. You see, it's already kind of good enough. There are some points like this area that I would like to have like a one edge loop from top to bottom to like separate the whole character in half. I mean, you can mirror this character in ZBrush, but that face in the middle would be triangulated. See, there are like some areas in between the fingers or this pelvis area that are not good at, they don't look as good at first, but when you smooth them, they're decent. They will do the job. Again, I try doing another ZBrush to see if it makes things better. For sure, yeah, it fixed the like a poly in the middle of the chest, and when you smooth it, it's definitely better than the first try. And yeah, even in the fingers. Yeah. And sometimes after I do this ZBrush, I store morph target. I added those in my UI and push the shapes around to match to the forms better. And I go to morph target tab and crank up the project more. What it does is it projects the new topology on the forms that you stored the morph target. And yeah, this is one of the reason I duplicate the sculpt that I have to make it visible and push things around to be able to better see if I need to match the topology to shapes a little bit better, which is not that important really in this stage, because at the end we are going to retopologize everything for as like a game version, but it's kind of like a OCD thing. And the whole reason I'm doing this this step is to, because basically when you have a super high res model like a dense dynamesh, you cannot smooth the big shapes easily. The higher your mesh is in ZBrush, the harder it would be for you to smooth everything. And I do this step to be able to have the subdivision. I'll go to the base version, the first subdivision, and smooth everything correctly. And after I finished moving around the shapes, I used project. I keep the original one, the only original version visible, and this one, and project that to this one. And I don't usually project everything, like I don't subdivide my zero mesh version too much, because my main subtool, main sculpt, is not as smoothed. It has some all of those polys visible when you zoom in, and I usually smooth it a couple times and project base sculpt and do another subdivision after that, because it's just kind of like a smooth after you subdivide for the last time, it kind of like smooths out some of those shapes. And yeah, after sometimes I go back, for example, here, this is not necessary, but I push things around a little bit more. Here I had another, after I finished recording the base body, I took a look at the body and I felt it would be better if I smooth some of those shapes around the pelvis and upper leg, because it was a little bit too angular, and I thought it might be easier to add pants and the rest of the costume on top of a little bit smoother shapes, because at the end of the day, none of these would be visible. Only hand and part of the feet would be visible. So it would be all about what's the shape of the body when you want to sculpt the costume on top of, because for sure that would influence the way that you sculpt the costume. And yeah, I use this more smoothed version. For the face, it's always hard to get a proper topology for the face out of zero mesher. For sure, there are tools that you can just paint the like a big edge flows, important edge flows around like a mouth and eyes and all of those, and it just make a polygroup out of them and ask zero mesher to follow those polygroups. But it's not necessary here, because at some point I'm going to project this face, especially on face and hand and maybe feet, on another base mesh that I have, because and again, if I don't want to do that, this character would be a game character, and sometimes you can just like make it work by retopologizing everything if it's super low res game character. But for this one, I'm going to project everything on top of a more clean face base mesh, and we'll go through that in the next chapters. But yeah, this is the whole thing about body and face in this chapter.